Okay, let's talk about the motherboard project. Everyone should be done through 4.6 as far as the instruction. You have to take the pre-project skirmish in order to open up the motherboard research choices. Everyone's going to get a different choice. Now, the way it works is you're choosing a motherboard manufacturing company and a CPU socket manufacturer. So if you were, for instance, going to choose the first choice here, where it says Asus-Intel, your company that you're researching would be Asus, and that's who's going to be making all the motherboards that you're looking at. The socket is going to be from this Intel socket list right here, meaning that you have to choose an Asus motherboard, if you did this one, that had an Intel socket of 1851, 1700, or 1200, with the caveat here that the gamer motherboard must be the 1851. No matter which one you pick, the gamer should be the newest socket unless that company doesn't make that socket. So if you do Asus and you do your research and you say they don't have an 1851 socket that I can use, if you come to me, I will give you permission to do the next one down. But you have to talk to me. You can't just say I couldn't find it. I need to verify that you can't find it and or help you with that choice. So for instance, if you chose this one, your company would be Gigabyte that you're doing your research on, and the socket list would be, in this case, the AMD socket list, meaning that you can do an STR5, AM5, or an AM4, but on your gamer, you would be restricted to the newest one, the STR5 socket. So just to make sure, the company is the first one, the socket list is the second one, and this is your socket list right up here. So that's the first thing to make sure everybody understands. When they make their choice, they're choosing their company and their socket type. You're going to be presenting for that company 3 different motherboards. A home motherboard, which is going to be the least expensive option that you can find from that manufacturer. A business motherboard, which is a mid-range one that we're going to go over those requirements here in a second. And a high-end gaming PC, which is going to have more requirements. It's going to go up in price as we look at these 3, okay? So look at the calendar, see when the scheduled date is. All presentations are supposed to be uploaded before class on the one you're giving. Now, the first thing I want to talk about is how we decide. So here are the restrictions for the different ones. So for my home PC motherboard, it should be the cheapest one. Whichever one that is, the cheapest, least expensive option, as long as it has integrated audio, video, and LAN. We need to be able to buy the home motherboard at the lowest cost and build a system that's at the lowest cost. So price is the overriding factor for your home one. I have been asked before if I have the same motherboard meets home and business specs, can I use it twice? Absolutely not. You have to pick a different one. Okay. The business PC adds 2 requirements. It has to have 6 SATA slots and it has to have an M.2. So if this already had that, then you have to pick the next price up. Okay, so this one has to have 6 SATA ports and an M.2 PCIe drive slot so that we could put a faster hard drive on that and as many as 6 SATA drives on there. It also has to have integrated audio and video and LAN because as a business, we're still trying to find the least expensive one with a few more options. The gamer one has more requirements. It has to have 6 SATA 3. It has to take at least 32 gig of RAM, which is not going to be a problem, but it has to take DDR5 RAM or the current RAM. It has to have 2 PCIe X16 ports for a high-end video card. You're not going to be able to use a micro ATX motherboard because no micro ATX motherboard is going to have 2 PCIe X16 ports. And that's so that we could put up to 2 video cards in this one if we wanted to. It has to have an M.2 NVMe slot, and it has to have 7.1 channel audio, and finally it has to be the newest CPU socket. So depending on which socket manufacturer you're looking at, it has to have one of those 2. If your manufacturer doesn't make a motherboard that fits in these specs with this socket, you need to come to me and talk to me about it, and I'll approve a lesser one, i.e. a 1700 AM5, if that's the second one on the list, but you have to talk to me about it. So this is how I'm choosing it. Then what am I doing in my presentation? First of all, you're introducing your company as if you work for them. Hi, I'm Brian Poole. I work for ASUS. I want to see where your headquarters is, including a map and a picture. If you're in Taipei, Taiwan, I want a picture of where Taipei, Taiwan is, because not everyone knows. I want to know how big your company is, either physical size or number of employees, but something to let us know how big your company is. How many motherboards they make a year. You should be able to find statistics somewhere in the last year or two with how many they're making. Don't give me a statistic from 15 years ago, because that's not realistic. I would like to know how long they've been making motherboards. And that's really to let us know whether the warranty is going to be good for your company. All the companies that you guys have are ones that have been around for a while. So that's 1 to 3 slides, depending on how you put it up there. You're going to introduce your topic, telling us why you're here, what you're presenting. I'm presenting 3 motherboards. Maybe give us the specs of those motherboards. This is the first 2 spots on the rubric, if you take a look at the rubric. And then you're going to get into the meat and potatoes of the presentation itself, which is talking about the motherboard. We want to know the speeds, the compatible CPUs, how much and what kind of memory it takes, how many and what kind of hard drive it takes, what are the integrated components and what are the expansion slots. And this is the rubric item that you're going to look at on the rubric for the motherboard itself. You have to hit all those items on your presentation in order to get the maximum points. You should be defining any terms that you didn't understand or you needed to look up. Just tell us what it means if you didn't know. Look it up and put it on your slide if you'd like to. So don't use terms that you don't know what it is, because I might be asking you. You have to have the cost with a link to where you got it. And like I told you in the example one in chapter 3, it's always a good idea to take a screenshot of that so that if it goes away, you can prove that you did find it. So that's a separate, this is worth 10 points in the rubric. The cost is worth another 5, showing us the cost with the link so you can click on it during your presentation and show us. At the end of that, you should have a question slide. Give us a chance to ask any questions about that motherboard. And as we talked about before, you should always have a works cited on your presentation. That's worth 10% of your presentation, showing us where you got your information. And like I told you on the chapter 3 example, I want the actual website in your MLA so that if I wanted to buy that part for the school, I would be able to find that part for the school. So that's pretty much it. We've gone through all this stuff already. You guys just have to do the project section now. There's a lot of resources listed on there beside your choices and the project itself. We've got some example motherboard projects there, as well as the rubric listed right on the list. And that is pretty much it for the project. I'm going to show you how I find the motherboard using Newegg. Okay, I'm going to go through how I find it. First of all, if I go to the Newegg motherboard site, if I've got AMD motherboards, I'm going to go ahead and click AMD motherboards. Then I'm going to pick my company. I'm going to go ahead and use ASRock as my example here and hit apply. You will most likely be using ASUS, MSI, or Gigabyte. Then I'm going to go down and pick the sockets that are allowed. So I'm going to say the TR5, AM5, and AM4, and I'm going to hit apply, realizing that if I was doing my gamer, I wouldn't be picking these other 2. Then I'm going to go down all the way down here and say condition. These always have to be new. So I'm going to hit condition and say new and hit apply. And then I'll go through and I'll do the home one first. So if I was looking for my home one, the only other restriction I have is nothing. I got no other restriction on the home one, do I? So I'm just going to go up here. Instead of saying featured, I'm going to say lowest price. The lowest priced ASRock one is $69. So there, I've got my home one. I'm going to go and take a look and make sure it meets the specs real fast. It's got one of the motherboard or CPU sockets that's on our list. I'm going to go down to specs. And does it have integrated audio, video? So let's see. Audio right there, LAN right there. Let's see about our video up here. And on this one, it doesn't specifically say it, but I can see that it does by looking. It's got HDMI and DisplayPort. That's going to be determined by the CPU I pick, but it does meet my specs. So if I was going to go and switch to business then, for the business one, I'm also going to have that, I've got to have 6 SATA slots. So I'm going to pick 6 and 8 and hit apply. And I've also said I've got to have an M.2 slot, so I'm going to go down there. I just saw M.2. Oh, you know what I didn't do? I didn't check my form factors to make sure I picked the ATX form factors. And M.2, I'm going to go down here and say that I need an M.2 slot. So I'm going to go ahead and, oh, I don't want to pick the one that says I can do SATA. And then down here, now I've got one for $79 for that one. And that's it for picking my motherboards for my project.